Our next discussion of the day, we're going to talk on the collaborative approach on waste economic circularity towards climate action in Indonesia. So to start with, I will straight away invite our moderator for the session. He is the head of the World Economic Forum's Ocean Action Agenda and Friends of Ocean Action. Please welcome Mr. Alfredo Giron. The floor is yours. Thank you. Yes, you can use that one. Thanks.
Hello, perfect. Thank you so much, Mona, and thank you so much, Ibu Nani, for being here. Thanks, everyone. I know this is a slightly crazy morning, but thank you so much, everyone, for making it here. I think we all recorded already 7,000 steps, even before the first session, but I hope that we are all ready and awake to have a very productive conversation. I just want to start by saying that this session is co-hosted by the Coordinating Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Investment and the Indonesian National Plastics Action Partnership. At the global level, the Global Plastics Action Partnership, which was launched in 2018 by the World Economic Forum, is a space to provide neutral space for public, private, and civil society actors to really come together and think about issues of circularity and plastics. Especially, how do we learn from each other, and how do we have some of those very difficult conversations? At the country level, GPAP supports multi-stakeholder action in several countries, Indonesia being the first one of them, providing all of these actors with that space. Indonesia was the very first country, as I mentioned, and at the global level, they have been setting the example on how to do this right. Back in 2019, when this was established, it started with a few core groups that were really excited about the vision. And now, only 4 years later, there's over 100 members that are part of the partnership, many of whom are represented in this panel today. So with that, I want to go into what are the two objectives that we have for today's session. The first one is to provide a platform for policymakers, private sector, and civil society to share and exchange lessons on what has happened in Indonesia, and we will hear a lot of those examples today. And the second one is to identify potential collaborations to continue strengthen how do we think about waste economic circularity towards climate action in Indonesia. So with that, I would like to invite Deputy Minister Nani Hendiarti, who is a very highly accomplished professional with a strong background in environmental and forestry management, with a focus on critical issues such as marine litter, waste management, carbon pricing, social forestry, and climate change. Thank you so much, Ibu Nani, for being here with us today. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Alfredo from WEF. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon to all of us. Distinguished speakers and also participants. I think we are happy here, but the time is actually it's not right. At 12 o'clock is is a difficult time because it's like conflict time with the lunch break. So, but I think we really would like to appreciate to all of here the participants, especially for to the speakers, that we can be here together at the panel dialogue on the collaborative approach on the waste economy circularity toward climate action in Indonesia. So in this occasion, we intend to showcase the progress of Indonesia in realizing circularity for waste and identify further potential collaboration with partners and tackling the waste and also plastic pollution issues aligned with our goal concerns in the climate actions. Specifically, I would like to express my gratitude to our colleagues from PLN, Minderu Foundation, Delterra, Business Partnership, Green Growth, and Global Goals 2030, P4G, and World Economic Forum for making the time to share their respective actions in tackling waste challenges in Indonesia. So as a nation currently experiencing rapid economic growth, Indonesia is faced with formidable waste generation, including plastic packaging. Data shows that in the year of 2021, Indonesia generated about 68.5 million tons of domestic waste per year, dominated by food waste, about 41%, and plastic waste around 18%. Plastic waste is increasing significantly for last 10 years, which counted to around 11% in the year 2010. Around 37% of the domestic waste is still unmanageable properly, that is potentially leaked to the environment, while most the waste, about 48%, are still dumped at the landed area, the landfill area. So perhaps my colleague can help me to run the PowerPoint file. PowerPoint file? Oh, okay. Yeah, because I saw in the same slide for a while. So since 2018, the government has issued the various policies. I think this is very important. The policies to improve waste management in more integrated way from upstream to downstream and encourage a circular economy. So in line with that, the government of Indonesia issued also the presidential decree number 83, 2018 concerning marine debris handling as a direction for collaborative effort of the various parties to reduce and handle marine plastic waste with ambitious measure and target. So this regulation allow the government to set marine plastic waste reductions target about 70% to be achieved by 2025. We can proudly mention here that within the last 4 years, with the collaboration among the stakeholders, we have success in reducing about 36 of plastic waste leakage to the sea. And our efforts are on the track to exceed 40% reductions by the close of 2023. So now it's still in calculation. Normally we will announce in the beginning of the year. So, but we are optimistic that we can get this target. It's about like 40% reductions. So we are transforming our waste management from linear into more circular one. Various innovation and technologies are started to be applied to be able to process waste into various products, such as recycling material, RDF, waste to energy, and composting. The government cannot work alone to overcome challenging on the waste management. So collaboration with the various parties is very important. So we recognize that the private-public partnerships are essential to finance marine plastic litter reductions effort and to realize the government's ambitious target in reducing marine plastic waste up to 70% by 2025 will require investment costs, a total about 5 billion US dollar. And a budget for operating funds, this is for capex, yeah, and then for operating funds, we require about 1 billion per year by 2025. So mainly to running the waste management system in effective way in recycling. So the recycling rate for the plastic waste has only reached about 10%, dominated by PET, plastic, which has high economic value. there have been innovations in using low value waste of plastic to make a mixture of asphalt, or we call it plastic tar road, building material and other creative uses. So many innovations have been implemented to reduce plastic waste pollution. More than 120 local governments have issued policies limiting single-use plastic bags. The other things, behavior change does take a long time, but it must continue to be done. In line with the government circularity effort, I would like to highlight the innovation of the utilization of fly ash and bottom ash, which is I think this is the important things that we can see what we call it. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so I think my colleagues doesn't print as properly. Sorry. So I think for the things we can see what to call it, the innovation of the recycling industry, in recycling material that improve in Indonesia. So we would like to, I think, to highlight here the importance of the partnership with both, I think, with the private sectors as well as with other sectors, including the academics. I think the baseline is important so we can measure how big is the reducing, for instance, of the potential leakage to the water. So this is, we have our baseline. And the baseline is not only based on the modeling, but also with ground data. So we combine between the modeling and the ground data. And I think the innovation as well is very important in the circularity. So we would like to share to you that the young generation now in Indonesia become more interested to make something new, innovation for making this more effective. For instance, we have a problem with collection of the plastic waste. So then they make such like what to call it, startup. Yeah, we call it startup. How to collect, how to pick the garbage. They already actually separated at home. So then they just call a message and then they will come to pick up. But this not in all cities, it's just like in some cities. So we want to scale up this. And also, I think the second one is how to process the waste. Also, we have, I think, integrated approach, as I mentioned, from the downstream to upstream, upstream to downstream, integrated. So means like we want to have less garbage or waste go to the landfill. So we built the facilities in near the source. Means like based on the village, based on, so we have like the city, we have some facilities that they actually make it closer to the resource. Then they separate the waste and then they make such processing. So consequent then we can get more material for recycling. So the third one, I think, related with the recycling industry, also we have in East Java, for instance, it's a big recycling industries. I think now we have about 2, become maybe 3. Because Java is a very potential island to get the plastic waste where they have economic value like PET. So then even one of the company, the recycling industry in East Java, they collect the plastic bottle from the eastern of Indonesia, from Papua, Maluku. So they have like collaboration with the people or collection there, and then bring with we have the national program how to bring the logistic to the east. And then when they come back from the east, so the ship is actually less, what to call it, they don't have anything to bring, then they bring plastic. So they will, they negotiate and approved by the Ministry of the, what to call it, transportation. They make it such kind of the benefit for this program. So kind of this, I think, what we have done, yes, in Indonesia. So we working integrated, but we want to scale up to more places. So we need finance, I think, to fill the gap. But the finance also, we see now, the investment for waste management is not limited to waste to energy. But also, we are open to have like kind of the investment for waste management using other technology such as refuse-derived fuel, so RDF, or other technology. So I think we understand that many world leaders will speak in this conference, COP28, UNFCCC. So we would like to share the same concerns as the current state of the climate crisis is, become, I think, more important. So we would like to say again what actually our president always say, like, lead by example. So we do something small, but we want to get the support to make it more bigger and larger area Indonesia, because you may know Indonesia is archipelagic countries. So we should have it also facilities in islands. So it's making less cost for also transportation or operational. So again, thank you so much for all of our partnership. So far, I think we have very good support also from our strategic partner, from the international organization, and also I think from the private sector. So we are looking forward to work more closer and to make it Indonesian coast clean. That means also we will make our water clean, and then we will connect it to, I think, the global water. So thank you very much. And then we hope from this session we will get more deep discussion or sharing session, yeah, from the speaker about how we can do and to make it better, not only Indonesia, regional. I think also we need to think about that because we're doing something good for the marine plastic debris, but we encourage also our regional also, we will have the same spirit, and then also the global. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, if I can invite our speakers to take a seat at the front so that we can have this conversation. I will introduce. Hello, hello, perfect. Yes, please take a seat. I will introduce each of you as we go through your questions so that we can spare the audience now from a long, long introduction. So. First of all, thank you again, everyone. I know it was a long way here, but thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Tony, for rushing through that. Thank you so much, Ibu Nani. This was a really inspiring message, and I think that from the World Economic Forum, I would like to recognize the efforts that Indonesia has made under your leadership to become the first national plastics action partnership, but also an example for many of the other national partnerships that have happened. We have several of them now, and a lot of the work has been based on what Indonesia has accomplished and what Indonesia is setting the example with. For example, the distributed model that you have been talking about, how do we reduce the cost of these programs by doing it in the right place, is something that has given us a lot of inspiration. So thank you very much for presenting that. And now I am going to turn to the panelists. to this discussion. And please allow me to welcome Mr. Tony Werby, the Chief Scientist of Minderoo Foundation. Tony is a Chief Scientist, but also this speaks to his career. He has been a scientist for a long time, and he's bringing this now into his new role and thinking about how to make the most impact. Minderoo is committed to stop plastics pollution as well as so many other things, but in this particular case, through a comprehensive life cycle approach to plastic management in several programs. And I will just very briefly mention 3 of them. The Plastic Waste Makers Index, that is a publication that really identifies who is doing what. The Minderoo Center for Plastics and Human Health that you have been supporting and that really puts a lot of thought leadership into the issue. And the Global Plastic Watch that really allows us to see what is happening. So with that, Tony, I would like to turn to you to ask you the question of, can you provide us with an overview of what is Minderoo Foundation doing and how is it supporting the national goals and addressing plastic pollution reduction and solid waste handling? Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Alfredo, and thank you for the invitation to the Indonesian government. It's absolutely a delight to be here. As Alfredo's just mentioned, we have been committed to doing what we can as a foundation to tackle the plastics crisis for about the last 5 years when we first established our plastics team. And that began actually focusing on ocean cleanup. We thought, given the amount of ocean plastic that there is, we need to invest as much as we can into cleaning up the ocean. And we very, very quickly realized that you can clean up beaches and you can clean up the ocean for an infinite amount of time and you can spend an infinite amount of effort on it, because if you don't solve the plastics crisis at its source, then you're never going to turn off the tap on all of that material that's flowing into the environment and into the ocean. And so our focus over the last few years has really increasingly gone upstream, so that we're focused on the source of the problem. And as Alfredo mentioned, we pride ourselves on being an evidence-based advocacy organisation. And in order to be able to advocate strongly for policy positions and for change, and we're advocating strongly through the Global Plastics Treaty process at the moment, we feel that it's very important to have done the work that we can stand behind, so that we have the best possible data we have on production rates of plastics, that we know where it's coming from, we know the companies that are producing it, we understand the flow through the value chain, and we can therefore really identify the best interventions right through the value chain and work with our partners and many governments around the world to affect the kind of change that we need. So just to touch on the work that we're doing in Indonesia, we really strongly support Indonesia's target of a 70% reduction in marine plastic debris. We think some of the targets that are set by Indonesia are very ambitious, and you know, we have programs on the ground, and Jeremy will talk a little bit about some of the work we're funding with Delterra, no doubt, on plastics collection and sorting. We recognise that there is no silver bullet in Indonesia or anywhere else in the world when it comes to addressing the plastics crisis. Recycling is a particularly important component in Indonesia because there's so many open landfill sites. There's still a lot of issues with the collection of the waste, obviously. There's still open burning that would be much less of a climate impact if that material was recycled. But of course, in order to have really effective recycling, you need off-takers for the recycled product, you need a guarantee of a supply chain, and I like to say one of the great paradoxes of the plastics crisis is that we're drowning in plastic, and yet reliable feedstock for a recycling facility continues to be one of the biggest challenges that keeps us back from having economically viable recycling facilities. We're also investing quite a lot through our strategic investment fund in alternatives to plastic. And as Ibu Nani just showed on the screen behind her presentation, we've also invested in a product called the Global Plastics Watch. We have a team of people that identified what the satellite signature of plastic waste dumps looks like, and we've been able to use that data to identify both legal and illegal waste dumps, and we can track how the size of those waste dumps is changing over time, and it can help authorities understand where they are, and if there's illegal activity going on, that it can be addressed, and that more broadly we understand where the location of those dump sites are so that they can be more effectively managed. But Alfredo, I'll stop there and look forward to the rest of the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tony. I took a lot of notes because I'm going to throw some of the points that you said to some of the other speakers in a little bit. But before we go to that, I would like to invite now Professor Richard Thompson, who is the leader of the plastics leader team at the Pisces Partnership and the Partnership for Plastics in Indonesian Society. So Professor Thompson is a professor in the marine biology and director of the Marine Institute at the University of Plymouth. You are also a world-leading marine scientist and at the forefront of many research regarding marine leader. I think it is important to recognize that in 2019, the university was awarded with the Queen's Anniversary Prize, precisely for pioneering work on research that you and your colleagues have conducted on marine microplastics pollution. So with that perspective and that expertise, how do you think that Pisces can contribute to bringing about systemic change to establishing a circular economy in Indonesia?
Well, thank you very much. I think what I want to do, first of all, as someone that's been working on the topic of marine pollution, particularly plastics, for 20 years, is to set my work in Indonesia into a slightly broader context, if I may. So, as a scientist, I think it's really important that we've got evidence to guide us towards the problem and also towards the solution. You know, it's been probably 20 or 30 years of scientific research that's raised awareness, that's brought us to this position we're in now, which I would call a once-in-a-planet opportunity with the UN Plastic Pollution Treaty to address this problem. But I think it's going to be equally important that we've got the science to guide the way towards solutions. You know, the work that I'm doing in Indonesia, and it frustrates me a bit that sometimes the science can be confusing, and that's why we also need to synthesize it. You know, I see scientific publications that highlight countries in Asia, including Indonesia, as being major polluters to the oceans. And yet, when I go there, I realize the problem in Indonesia is very different to that in Europe and North America. When I see littering at home, this is people being careless and irresponsible and dropping litter on the streets when actually they've got a better way of dealing with it. But in Indonesia, that's not what I see. What I see is people cleaning their homes very meticulously, but that they've unfortunately got no place to put the waste that they generate because the products they're being supplied with, there's no waste management system for them. And so they're having to bag them up and take them for the best disposal available. So it's really clear that we need to improve waste management. And circularity is a key part of that. But I also think that it's important that we set that into context. So while there's opportunities in Indonesia, and I'll talk to Pisces in a minute, I would say that the UN Plastic Pollution Treaty is a golden opportunity also for Indonesia to put pressure on other member states who are actually partly responsible for some of the underlying causes in producing products that are not compatible with circularity. You know, even if I look to Europe and North America, where we have very advanced waste recycling, we're still recycling less than 10% of all the plastics. That's not because of a shortage of waste management infrastructure. It's because many of the products that are designed have been designed without any thought whatsoever for the end of life, for their potential circularity. Even high-value items like PET, designed sometimes with colorings in them, which will limit recycling. So the point, and forgive me for laboring it, but as we talk about circularity, I think it's absolutely crucial that we do so in the context of a waste hierarchy, which, as I'm sure you all know, starts with reduce. There are numerous plastic products that we do not need in the first place. It moves to reuse, and we need to develop reuse formats. And that needs to come from companies in Indonesia, but also critically outside of Indonesia. So we're not designing billions of single-use plastic packaging and sachets with multi-layers that can't be recycled. So there's pressure we need to put outside. So we need to work down, reduce, reuse, and then we come to circularity. Let's please not kid ourselves that building additional waste management infrastructure will solve the problem. It is proven worldwide that that alone will not solve the problem. It is proven in Europe and in North America. So yes, we need to develop that infrastructure, but we need to set it into that wider context of reduce, reuse, and recycle. And I think if that's okay for now, I will stop there and I'll come more specifically, if I may, to the work that we're doing in Indonesia in my second intervention. But I make that plea to keep circularity in context and not, Indonesia, to lock yourself in to technology that will require feeding with waste. We need to start by turning the tap off, as you said, upstream from the oceans, but also upstream from waste management. This needs to start with reduction and better design so that circularity can actually be achieved.
Thank you so much. I want to clap after that last sentence. This is very important, and thank you so much for setting this conversation in a broader context, because I think that one of the things that we tend to do very quickly in these conversations is we go into the very specific issue and we forget that there's underlying causes that we need to be talking about. So thank you very much for that. And the other thing that you made me realize very well, along with what Tony was saying, is the importance of knowledge before we start talking about the solutions. Do we really understand the problem so that we can start to understand the solution? And that takes me to you, Robin. I think that WRI, as a leading organization that puts thought leadership out there for civil society on how to act and for public sector on how to act and even the private sector, the Green Growth and the Global Goals Initiative, P4G, has been really contributing to green and inclusive growth in low and middle income countries, particularly by helping SMEs, small and medium enterprises, to become investment ready. And you and I were talking before, and I think it's so important, that perspective on what is the role of these players in helping us address the larger issues, but always based on knowledge. So the question that I have for you is, how does P4G, as a funder, assesses and manages risks associated with circular economy projects? How can partnerships between businesses, governments, and civil society enhance the financial landscape for these kind of projects?
Thanks so much. And thanks to our organizers for this great event. And I have to say, this is a beautiful pavilion here. I think Indonesia should win the award for most beautiful pavilion. So thank you for this critical discussion. And P4G is a startup accelerator. And not only do we provide funding and technical assistance to startups, and startups are inherently micro and small enterprises. And whether their trajectory is one of growth or one of steady implementation is immaterial. What is material is that it is startups that will have the solutions, and particularly local startups that have to live in the communities that are affected by the challenges of plastics and other climate challenges that we face. So at P4G, one of the ways that we mitigate risk is by doing a limited amount of work on the tech side of things and really waiting until there are companies, startups that are looking more at systems integration and how you can work across civil society, public sector, and then with their business solution, come in and be able to implement a system that can handle plastics waste. And so we've had a number of partnerships that do this. And what we work with those partnerships is getting them to their stage where they are revenue positive, where they're able to realize their initial customer sets. And often these are trial customer sets, but they are, very importantly, the first customer acquisitions. And then that sets that company on a path to get out of that valley of death and into a growth phase. And what we do is we work with them to help them get through that, through grants, and then the technical assistance so that when they're going out to the investors for their seed fund raise or their post-seed pre-series A or their Series A fundraise, they have the right documentation, they have the right evidence, and they can also demonstrate that their impact, their social and environmental impact, is very real.
Thank you so much. I think that you mentioned a key word that I will get back to you with, which is measuring impact. I think this is something that we need to dive a little bit deeper into shortly. That takes me to you, Jeremy, who I think that your organization, Delterra, has a lot of experience thinking about how to deploy these solutions on the ground. And I think you have been doing a lot of this work, and Jeremy is the current Director of Partnerships at Delterra, bringing experience from previous roles at Ocean Wise, David Suzuki Foundation, and a few others, and really thinking about how that global picture applies to local problems. So, Jeremy, the waste sector, particularly the organic part, is the third highest emitter of methane in the world. And drawing from Delterra's experience, what are some of the key factors that play a pivotal role in effectively managing organic waste at local levels?
Yeah.
Sorry, and one more thing. And if you can add a little bit on that last question on how do you think about measuring impact? Let's start there.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Alfredo. Thank you to the government of Indonesia, to NPAP for this amazing pavilion. And I'm kind of just can't stop staring at the picture and imagining that I'm out there on the ocean. So yes, Delterra, we are an environmental nonprofit organization that was founded by McKinsey and Company, actually, but are now completely independent and working in partnership with others like Mindaru Foundation, who are grateful to have the support for the work that we're doing in Indonesia and globally. We actually have a very real, practical, on-the-ground presence. I have more than 40 colleagues who are based in Indonesia. I wish one of them was here speaking right now, not me, but we are very much rooted in the places where we work. And what Delterra does, we're very much focused on system change. We help build capacity for municipal, subnational governments to go from high leakage of waste, high burning and landfilling rates to more circular systems. How can we build that capacity? How can we help develop the connections all the way along the value chain so that we can put into place practical circular economies? So we're doing that in Latin America and also in Indonesia. And right now we're working in Bali because we thought if we can solve the situation in Bali as one of the islands, then we can figure out how to scale that throughout Indonesia into other parts of Southeast Asia. And I don't want to talk about plastics for a second because plastics definitely is one of the big issues. But as you mentioned, Alfredo, organic waste is a big challenge as well. Actually, we did some waste characterization analysis, found that 60% of the waste streams in Bali are actually organic materials, so food waste, yard trimmings, those sorts of things. And those are primarily being burned or dumped, so they're not being separated from the waste stream. And when they go into landfill or into dumps, they're emitting methane emissions, 80% more potent than CO2 in the short term. And a big reason of why I'm here at COP is because methane is finally getting more attention as a promising climate solution that has very low tech and very cost-effective ways to deal with it, which starts from what we do at Delterra, starts from separating it at the household level. It's behavior change of getting people to separate their dry recyclables from organics. And then the challenge, which is what we're working on right now with Global Methane Hub and others, is how do you then develop the business case to have organic waste go somewhere other than landfill or other than being burned or dumped? That's the biggest challenge right now, is how do you get the financial mechanisms working, whether it's compost, carbon credits, black soldier flies. There's lots of different potential applications for organic waste, but if we can keep 60% of the waste stream out of landfills, imagine what that can do for the value of recyclable materials, for the cost effectiveness of municipalities like in Bali. Imagine if you can extend the life of your landfill by 60% more. So we feel like this is a huge untapped potential, and right now that's what we're trying to figure out at the municipal level is how can we get organic materials out of landfill and develop markets for those. There's a huge economic opportunity and climate opportunity that we feel is untapped. We just need to get the system working together to develop markets for organic materials. So that's a big focus for us right now, and that goes hand in hand with all waste streams because it very much is systemic, as was mentioned by Robin. So.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. I think it's very important how you helped us to bring this conversation back, just as Richard was doing, to the broader issue. This is not only about plastics, this is a conversation about waste management, but at the same time you did something very powerful, which is take us down to behavioral change. And I think that is something that, again, we need to get back in a little bit. So before we move on to our last speaker, I want to note that the National Plastics Action Partnership, actually, our 4 first speakers are part of it. And this is just to show the power of partnerships. Look at all of the different approaches that are happening here, all of the work that Minderoo has been leading both at a global scale and local, all of the science, all of the community approaches, all of the entrepreneurial approaches. There's so many things that need to converge together to address some of these issues, and that is something I really wanted the audience to take with you. Finally, I am going to move on to Mr. Andy Macasau, the Vice President of Management and Utilization of Fly Ash Bottom Ash Management at PLN. First, I want to share that PLN is an Indonesian state-owned company tasked with supplying electricity needs for the Indonesian people. And in particular, Mr. Andy Macasau is a professional with over 20 years of experience in public utility and electricity industry, holds a bachelor in mechanical engineering and a master's in management from Hasanuddin University. And in 2023, he was appointed as the Vice President of Management and Utilization of Fly Ash Bottom and Ash Management for PTPLN. Mr. Andy, can you share the perspectives of the utilization of this fly ash bottom ash as the effort of supporting solid waste management in Indonesia? And how does PLN ensure that the use of these materials aligns with environmental regulations and standards?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alfredo. The main focus of today is fly ash and bottom ash management to support waste circularity economy, Indonesian climate action, and the utilization of FEBA have seen increase after or since enactment regulation number 22, 2021. And the lesser regulation has helped PLN to enable to pass the way, FEBA pass the way, broader business opportunities and increase employment opportunities, and then sustainability of environmental. PLN from coal power plant, PLN is producing around 3 million FEBA annually, and since 2018, PLN has reached 2.3 million ton FEBA, marking 186% increase from 2021, and in 2023. PLN has reached 2.4 million ton FEBA, around 160% from production. And PLN has utilized the FEBA both of PLN internal needs and afford and actively to promote the advantage of FEBA to local or external off-taker. And then we have 9 FEBA products like cement, material, ready-mix concrete, and then soil compaction, batako, and paving block. And then, FEBA has result in positive social economy for circular economy. And the circularity economy has helped to create opportunity for micro, small, and medium enterprise. In this year, we has helped around 200 micro, small, medium enterprise, and around 1,000 labor is involved. And then FEBA has helped micro, small, medium enterprise to reduce the cost by 300 rupiah per pieces. And how to make sure that the utilization of FEBA aligned with environmental regulation? PLN has prepared the technical detail for document for FEBA utilization, which has received recommendation or approval from Ministry of Environmental and Forestry. And FEBA also utilize based on the standard of national standard, which are quality of utilization FEBA is tested. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, I took a lot of notes because you made a lot of points that connect with our other panelists, particularly on the role of innovation, of job creation, of local impacts. But also, I think that you brought up a new point that we hadn't discussed much in the context of Indonesia, which is how do we match this with policy? And I think that's a very important consideration because, as Richard was saying, many of these things are not an infrastructure problem. Many of these things are a regulation problem, and how do we design the products? So thank you so much for that. That takes me to you, actually, Richard. I think that it is really important to understand what is the science that is happening, what are some of the gaps, and what have you been doing in partnership with Indonesia that can help us start understanding the magnitude of the problem and of the solutions?
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, if I turn now more to the specific research that we're doing in Indonesia. So I'm working as part of the Pisces project, which is about plastics in Indonesian societies. It's a £6 million project funded by the UK, by Global Challenges Research funding. Around about 30 partners in Indonesia and in the UK. So academics from the Institute of Technology in Bandung, from BRIN, Asian Institute of Science and Technology, local partners including NPAP, scientists and partners from different disciplines, different backgrounds. So social scientists, waste managers, environmental scientists, looking at the problem from different perspectives with a view to integrating this from a kind of systems thinking perspective so that we include all of the externalities, if you like. So some of my work as an environmental scientist has been to look at plastics and waste on the ground in 30 kecamatan around Indonesia, looking on roads, on tracks, on rivers, looking at waste management facilities, looking for links, if you like, between the behavior aspect that you mentioned and the amount of refuse that we find, whether that's occurring as litter carelessly dropped on streets, or whether it's actually waste that's been managed by the households and bagged up, but simply then there's nowhere to take it, and also quantifying open burning. So we're looking at all of those issues, and then what we're trying to do is to bring those together, to integrate them using what we call a living lab. And we developed a living lab, the first one, and we hope that there will be others. The first one is in Banyuwangi. And the idea there, it's in Banyuwangi in East Java, so is really that we can work together with local stakeholders to help to co-design and to co-create solutions, particularly to single-use plastics, but grounded in the evidence that we see around the problem, to make sure we're, if you like, we're not coming up with solutions that are looking for a problem. We're designing solutions that are matched to the local problems. And that includes working, of course, with local community leaders. Now, the pilot research that we're doing is to look at barriers, if you like, to identify barriers that might retard us so that we can accelerate adoption and implementation in line with circularity, in line with policy, in line with extended producer responsibility, including infrastructure and financial support to help support recycling of waste, let's say. So the initial results, I mean, the pilot, the Living Lab is only recently established, but the initial results show, for example, you talked about behavior change, and of course that's going to be really important, but the social science that we're doing has demonstrated actually very much a willingness amongst the local community and the users to adopt different formats, different reusable formats, or formats that are more compatible with circularity, as opposed to, let's say, multi-layer sachets or styrofoam, which are less compatible. And of course, we're only a few minutes away from the new MRF. The systemic MRF, I think, is about 10 minutes away. So there's a willingness, I would say, to adopt new formats. And so I think, behavior change is going to be important, but let's be clear that willingness is part of the journey. Where I actually think we need behavior change is right from the product design stage, so that we're designing products that are going to be compatible with that willingness that we're showing on the ground, so that we, as we can provide the evidence, we can demonstrate the willingness in the Living Lab, but some of the new products that we'll need, once we can highlight what those formats might be, actually producing them and moving to more circular design formats, it's going to be, the responsibility of others in product design. We can help to enable that and to influence it, and certainly to help to stimulate local collection and the infrastructure, but ultimately we're going to need to change behaviors right from the design stage. I mean, to go back to my opening more general point, one of the issues here is that we still unfortunately have a business model around plastics that dates back to the 1950s, when we started to mass produce the plastic products. At that time we were maybe making 5 million tons of plastic items globally. If you keep in mind 40% of everything we produce is single use, we're now producing probably approaching 400 million tons of plastic globally. 40% of it is single use. So we simply can't sustain that amount of waste. But regrettably, the design hasn't moved on from the linear models in the 1950s of fossil oil and gas, single-use products, long-term persistent waste, where end of life has not been recognized. So that has to change. The evidence that we're providing on the ground in Indonesia will help to guide the way, but as well as the infrastructure that we're talking about, we will need changes in the behavior right along the supply chain, and that's what's coming clear. It's not necessarily a blockage at the behavior of individuals, of individual users. It's a blockage maybe further back up the supply chain that we need to embrace as well. So I guess what I'd say, in conclusion, is there's a role for all of us in this. It's the end users, it's the managers of the waste, but it's also policy and product design that are going to be critical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. You are continuously bringing us upstream, and I think that is a very important point. And Jeremy, I would like to challenge you to think a little bit about this from your perspective as well. From the perspective of organic waste, what are some of those challenges that we are facing upstream? Because you do a lot of work with the communities in there. What are some of those other challenges, and how is Altera addressing through a systemic approach in Indonesia?
Yeah, thank you. And actually, on plastics, we are working upstream in Indonesia. We have a program called Plastic IQ, which is working with some of the major producers of plastics to help them develop strategies for packaging so that they can design it in a way that's meant to be recycled. A lot of these companies, especially multinational companies, have one set of packaging strategies for every single market and not really recognizing that every country they work in, actually every neighborhood in some cases, will have a different waste management system. And so they have to understand what will happen to that package that I'm putting into the market in Indonesia. Can the recycling system absorb that? Is it being separated? Where is it going? Can it be recycled? And there's just a lack of understanding and capacity among some of those companies. So we've developed this digital tool to help companies design packaging for circularity. It starts with reduction, what things can you get rid of completely, and then also if you're producing products, what types of materials, what types of products are most likely to be recycled in the market that they end up in. So really trying to increase that capacity there. Food loss and food waste is that's a really challenging question to answer, actually. Like, how do you upstream limit food loss? And there are some great organizations that are looking at that. We currently aren't focusing on upstream in terms of organics, and food waste is only part of the organic materials. There's a lot of like yard trimmings and other like pruning and things that are a bigger percentage of organic waste than food. But in terms of like policy and regulations, maybe if I can bring it to that point, we need to come up with a viable business case for organic waste to be turned into something other than ending up in landfill. And so it's really about stimulating those markets. And I would say for the role that the government of Indonesia could play is in incentivizing new markets for organic materials. So for example, could you put a minimum requirement of compost to go into agriculture? Like how you have in fuel standards, you have 10% ethanol minimum mixed into fuel standards. Could you do the same for compost that could go into agriculture, could really support regenerative agriculture, and that could also then stimulate downstream those markets that would justify segregated collection of organics, because then all of a sudden there's an offtake market for it. I think that's the biggest challenge with a lot of these waste streams is the offtake markets they're just not offering enough money to justify developing a stream for that. And the ones that are very limited, PET, HDPE. So I think that's the role that policy can play, or even like the private sector to stimulate new markets. We experimented with that in Argentina, where one of the sorting centers we were working with were already collecting, because we got behavior change to separate recyclables. So they were already collecting all of these flexible plastics, but then they were just going to landfill after that because there was no market for the flexible plastics and there was no incentive to bale these flexibles. So he said, what if we paid you an extra $150 a ton to collect all of these LDPE plastics? And that actually worked in order to incentivize this new market, and we matched them with recyclers who could take that material, and now we're reducing that incentive. So I think this is something that can apply to any type of material that's in waste, is like, what are those incentives that could stimulate new market development for the economics to work?
Thank you so much. That is a perfect plug-in for my next question, because you make a very good point that some of these problems are very difficult to address from a product design perspective. Some can, but regardless of whether it's through policy to incentivize markets or regardless of whether it is for products, I think that the common thread is that you open up opportunities for entrepreneurs to come in, design solutions, and scale up. And I'm sure you guessed that question was coming to you, because I really want to hear from you. What are some of the promising solutions that you have seen across the spectrum of problems that we have been hearing about today, and that you will encourage the region to start paying attention to?
Yeah, sure. So happy to talk about a few of our startups in plastics. And one of the things that I really want to emphasize is what we've talked about is systems. But one of our partnerships is part of a broader consortia pulled together by the Netherlands, and it's called Plastics in Circles. And the idea is to address plastics at all of its different sources and destinations, and look at different types of plastics. So I mentioned earlier that we're more focused not so much on the climate tech as in the hardware, more on the softer side and the system side, but we do occasionally take a little bit of risk on the tech side, and we have done that in plastics with a small company called Upcycling that is looking at those harder to recycle or really non-recyclable plastics, such as sachets, cigarette butts, other things like that. And they are using a process to basically turn it into a non-structural building material, plastic-based building material. But it's very difficult because these plastics are typically so commingled and with a lot of contaminants. So it's a very difficult process. It is not a great example of managing risk, but it is a great example of the kind of innovation that needs to be fostered more, that needs support. And it is one of the challenges that innovators face in this space, is not only are they targeting low middle income countries, low middle income challenges, low middle income demographics, but they're also working in a very unknown tech space. So there has to be that longer runway for these companies, and that's where it is important to have partnerships that are coming in and can support them as they grow their tech and as they realize those initial sales. So that was one partnership. Another partnership is looking at chipping plastics and doing a magnetic separation, essentially, of those plastics so that they can take mixed plastics, clean them, chip them, and then separate them into separate waste streams. In our another partnership we have is Sweep Smart in Ambon, is looking at recycling centers, but really looking at collection centers where there haven't been collection centers before, and working with the municipality on setting those up, on training a workforce to come in, and then providing a safe employment environment, safe from a health and safety standpoint, to then have that central collection area and then the sorting. And as Jeremy was saying, a lot of the waste that comes out is not plastics, it is organics. So we're talking about, again, and this is where the partnerships are so important, we're talking about multiple waste streams, which makes this challenge all the more complex. So that's just a few of our solutions. One of the other solutions is a company called Cyclus, which has really targeted the sachet marketplace, where I think a decade or so ago, sachets were seen as a great way of having affordable products at the base of the pyramid. But now we know what they have done is introduced a terrible source of pollution that is non-recyclable. And so they have gone old school and looked at refill solutions. And the refill solutions, they're able to offer bulk pricing, and so they can be cost competitive with the sachets and still hit that base of the pyramid demographic. Now, one of the important things that we do at P4G is not only do we support startups, we support national platforms that are high-level platforms comprised of government representatives and private sector representatives, typically from leading industry associations, to work on some of the challenges that are encountered as these startups get into the marketplace. And this can be something that is as seemingly simple but bureaucratically very challenging as just making sure there's a checkbox on an importation form. These small challenges and these small regulatory shifts that can make a big difference for our startups. But in the case of Cyclus, one of the challenges that they did not realize they had, but they did encounter, was that certain products, especially facial products, hygienic products, must be packaged in a certified and sanitary facility. And so the refill solutions that they were starting were actually counter to that regulation. But what we were able to do with our national platform and in partnership with NGOs and NPAP was essentially a position paper examining how this could be treated, how this could be handled. And then Cyclus, in the meantime, had to stop that product line and redouble its efforts on existing product lines, which of course as a startup, a small startup with limited operating capital, is very challenging. But that's where partnerships such as P4G, where we come in with the non-returnable grant funding, we can help mitigate that risk.
Thank you so much. And those are very powerful examples, and I think that all of them are going to face the challenge of scaling up.
Yes.
And I think that is a very key component, especially because as you think about regulations and as you think about how then this gets incorporated into the whole system, it's not only a question of money. It becomes also a question of whether the system is ready to take on it. And I think that the example that you were providing on PLN is a very good example of that. The management of that ash is a very good example of how you have been able to align some of the policy, some of the regulation, some of the job creation opportunities. And so the question that I have for you is precisely on scaling up. We're where are you going from here? What are some of the plans and some of the ambitions to scale up?
Thank you, Mr. Alfredo. In this year, 2023, FABA has result in positive environmental impact by reducing emission. As you know that the cement production proceed is one of main contributor for the emission, CO2 emission. According to the Bandung Institute of Technology, said that if you produce 1 ton of cement, you will produce 0.76 of ton of CO2, and it's a big problem if we have to solve that, and that's why FABA come to substitute of cement. I think fly ash can use to substitute partial substitute of cement, without reducing strength, without reducing the quality. Usually we use around 20 to 30% of FABA of the total, and then from this year there are 2.4 million ton of FABA has been proposed, and most FABA has been used to substitute of cement, around 45 until 50%, and by not produce more quantity of cement material, clinker and TG and several products. This year FABA has avoided emission by 187 CO2, 87 kiloton CO2. And moving forward, PLN has several planned next step for FABA management improvement. First, PLN is collaborating with Ministry of Environmental and Forestry standard product to provide the standard management standard product. As you know, yesterday PLN has signed memorandum of understanding with PT Bukit Asam to implementation of utilization of fly ash to the Bukit Asam former mining, and then we propose the utilization of FABA in a draft presidential regulation to accelerate the reclamation of former mining, and then but the last but not least, we already proposed that. We already proposed that. Sorry. We already proposed the utilization of FABA for government project. For several government project like KCEC. KCEC project kereta api Cina Indonesia cepat Indonesia Cina, and toll road Semarang to Jogja, and several project in new capital city like bridge and toll road to the new capital city. Yes, sir.
Thank you, and I think this is a very good example of where there is a good opportunity to really take it to the national level and to really have a solution that was already tested and scale it up in a very big way, especially with these larger projects. Thank you so much for sharing that. Tony, that brings me to my last question, which is one very specific example where we heard that there's a global opportunity is plastics and the Global Plastics Treaty. And I think that Richard shared a very specific challenge to the governments and said, maybe the Indonesian government wants to take the lead in encouraging those others that are the sources of that pollution to do something. I think this is very well aligned with what Minderu is trying at a global scale, and would love to learn your perspective on how Minderu is supporting these negotiations.
Yeah, thank you. Richard mentioned that this is our once-in-a-planet opportunity, which is a great line, if I can borrow it. We do have a moment in time right now to ensure that we get a legally binding, strong global plastics treaty that really drives changes in the amount of plastic that is the amount of plastic that is produced, and sees investment into all of the ways in which plastic can be replaced and managed and ultimately dealt with as waste. There is a coalition of high ambition countries. I think there are 60-some countries in that coalition now. There's also a coalition of very low ambition countries, I think, that became very clear at the last negotiating meeting in Kenya a few weeks ago. And there are other countries that are in the middle, that are high production countries. They don't want to be part of the high ambition coalition because they don't want a legally binding treaty and they don't want caps on virgin polymers, but they also don't want to be seen as part of the bad coalition. And so I think the job for the high ambition coalition countries is to drag that middle ground to the light, and really exert pressure on those countries to recognize the problem and to appreciate that we just cannot keep doing things the way we're doing them. And if it's a big part of your economy, then you're going to have to get smarter, and we're going to have to put regulations in place, and we're going to have innovation to meet the new regulatory requirements, okay? So Inge Anderson said yesterday on a panel, this treaty is coming, right? We all know that it's desperately, desperately needed. The role that Minderoo is playing is that we are supporting countries with some of the, with their own submissions. We're doing a lot of work that I mentioned previously on plastics and human health, which is leading to our position on better chemical regulation. There are 10 to 13,000 chemicals used in the production of plastic. The health impacts on humans of the vast, vast majority of those chemicals is not well understood. We have a plastics and human health team that are working on that at the moment. We're funding quite a lot of clinical research. They produced what's called the Global Plastics Map recently. It's a great publication if you go onto the website. It basically synthesizes all of the peer-reviewed literature on the link between plastics and chemicals and human health that's been published in the last 50 years. It's a great resource for anybody that really wants to understand the detail, but it also identifies where there's huge gaps in our knowledge. And so we're committed as well to trying to fill those gaps so that we understand much more. We need to take a much more conservative approach to the way we use chemicals, not only in the production of plastic, but far more broadly in our society. As I mentioned, we want this treaty to be legally binding, and we believe also, and I mentioned this on a panel yesterday, that, one of the biggest challenges with plastics is the economics around it. As long as it's cheaper to pull oil out of the ground and make virgin material compared to collecting, sorting, recycling, and reusing plastic, then we're up against this economic issue. So we have to change the economics around plastics. Policy is part of it. We can insist on having minimum recycled content in some plastics that are produced. You put the regulation in place, industry will respond, you get off-take agreements, that will underpin the investments in the infrastructure that you needed. So you can reverse engineer some of that through policy. You can also put a fee on the production of virgin polymers right at the top of the supply chain. And if you do that, you end up collecting a whole lot of money that can be used as investments into alternative materials and investments into better waste management and recycling and investments into what you need to do in order to create a much more circular economy. So we've released a discussion paper on that. It's available on the Minderoo website. I really encourage anyone that's interested in kind of some out-of-the-box thinking to have a look at that. But the fee, the work we're doing on plastics and human health, really driving hard for a legally binding instrument, and countries like Indonesia, countries that have high ambition around this. I just echo Richard's comment. We have to drag those other countries that need to be in the light into the light, and there's a role for us and the governments that are in the High Ambition Coalition to do that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tony. So just to close, because we are coming up on time, I would like to highlight 3 topics that came up. The first one is that we need to set this conversation in the broader context of the circular economy. Basically, each of our panelists talked about this in a slightly different way. And I think that it is a conversation about product design, infrastructure, policy, investment, innovation. It goes all around. So thank you so much for sharing that. The second thing is that there's no silver bullet. And I think that the variety of solutions is just a reflection of that. So not even within one country like Indonesia, there's a silver bullet. There's multiple solutions. Now imagine at a global scale. So that's the importance of evidence-based solution making. And the third one is we have this historic moment with the Plastics Treaty, where this is an issue not only about changing behavior, but also governments having a role and a responsibility to pull others into that high ambition. And of course, Indonesia has a very good opportunity to do that. So with that, I would like to thank all of our panelists. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but we heard very interesting insights. Thank you so much, and thank you all as well for joining us today.